When I first walked into this house, the floors still smelled like fresh paint. The windows were bare, and sunlight flooded every corner like a quiet promise. We hadn't even put the furniture in yet, but I could already see it. Our life together, a beige couch by the wall, the sound of coffee brewing on quiet Sundays, photos of us smiling, frozen in time, framed and hung neatly like we had nothing to fear. I remember standing in the center of the empty living room, spinning slowly like a child, laughing. He looked at me like I was his whole world, and I believed I was. Back then, I believed many things. We painted the bedroom walls ourselves. He hated the color I picked, too soft, he said, but he helped me anyway, hands stained with lilac paint, his laughter echoing as I accidentally got some in his hair. We ordered takeout and ate on the floor, boxes open between us, wine in mismatched mugs, no furniture, no pressure, just love, simple, light, beautiful. At night, we lay side by side on a mattress without a frame, holding hands, talking about how many kids we might have. 2, maybe 3. He kissed my forehead and said, "This house will see everything, all of it, all of us." And for a long time it did. The first few years were full of little moments that made life feel big. Morning routines with toothpaste on both our noses, dancing in the kitchen to old songs from college, burnt pancakes, spilled juice, arguments about movies, makeup kisses. I remember thinking, if this isn't happiness, then what is? I kept flowers in the hallway, candles in the bedroom, and hope. I kept so much hope, but hope can fade quietly, like perfume at the end of the day. You only notice it's gone when you stop and breathe. He started coming home later, said work was heavy, said he was tired. I believed him because love makes you want to believe. But then kisses stopped. The conversations shortened. The smiles became rare and the laughter extinct. I asked him once, "Are we okay?" He looked up from his phone and nodded. Of course. Why wouldn't we be? That was the first time I felt lonelier next to him than I ever did alone. One evening, I cooked his favorite meal. I lit candles. I wore the dress he once said made me look like poetry. He came home, barely looked up, said he wasn't hungry, went straight to the shower. I stood there in the kitchen, holding the salad bowl, with trembling fingers, watching the candle flicker like it didn't know if it should keep burning. I stopped wearing that dress, stopped lighting candles, stopped trying to be poetry for someone who no longer read me. house changed, not suddenly, not dramatically. It was in the little things, the silence over breakfast, dishes left in the sink, the way he said good night without looking at me. He started locking his phone, started texting in the hallway, started turning away in bed, and I started shrinking. I stopped telling him about my day, stopped laughing out loud, stopped singing in the kitchen. I used to be full of life. Now I was a whisper. One morning, I stood in the mirror, barely recognized myself. The girl who once danced barefoot through this house was now walking on eggshells. The house began to feel different, colder, not because of the temperature, but because warmth no longer lived here. And that was when it hit me. This house had become a cage, not of bars, but of silence and unsaid things, and love that used to live here, but now just wandered the halls like a ghost. It wasn't just the house that changed. It was me. I used to hum while I cooked. Now I counted minutes in silence. I used to write him notes, small ones, tucked into his coat pocket. Sometimes just a heart, or drive safe, or come home soon. I stopped because one day he came home and the note was still in his pocket, unopened, unseen, unwanted. It hurt more than I expected, not because he forgot to read it, but because he didn't even notice it was there. One night, I opened his laptop, not because I didn't trust him, but because I didn't trust the silence between us anymore. There was a message, just one, from someone named M. It wasn't explicit, wasn't romantic, just casual, but I read it over and over. I miss talking to you like this. You get me, he replied. I miss it too. He didn't cheat on me with his body, but he gave someone else the version of himself I used to know, and that was betrayal too. I closed the laptop and walked to the kitchen, sat on the cold floor, held my knees to my chest, and cried, not loud, not messy, just quietly, the kind of crying you do when you're afraid of hearing it echo back too clearly in an empty home. The next day, he brought me flowers, white tulips. I stared at them, wondering if she liked tulips too, wondering if this was guilt or habit. I said thank you, put them in a vase, and watched them die slowly over the week, just like us. I began talking to myself. Little things. Did you eat today? Breathe, just breathe. Don't cry until after the shower. I started writing again. Not poetry, not letters, just pages and pages of truth that I couldn't say out loud. One evening, while folding laundry, I found one of his old t-shirts, the one he used to wear when we binged movies in bed. It still smelled like his cologne. I held it to my face, then placed it gently back in the basket, like I was folding away a version of him I could no longer reach. I tried to leave. Once, I packed a small bag, put on my shoes, stood by the door, but then I heard his key turning. He walked in, looked tired, and said, "Dinner ready." And just like that, I stayed, not because I forgave him, not because I was weak, but because I didn't remember how to be anything else but his. We became strangers with shared bills, shared bed, shared silence. I passed him the salt at dinner like it was a peace treaty. He nodded like it was enough. I started having dreams of running, of screaming in rooms with no windows, of trying to speak but no sound coming out. And when I woke up, I realized it wasn't just a dream, it was my life. I missed the girl who danced in the kitchen. I missed her bright eyes, her open laugh, her belief in forever. Now she only came back in fragments when I was alone, when he wasn't home, when I whispered her name and promised, "I'm coming back for you." I began noticing sunlight again, not because I felt happy, but because it reminded me what warmth felt like. Because in this house, warmth had become a memory. He still kissed me goodbye in the mornings, but it was a habit, a motion, a ghost of something that used to mean everything. And every time the door clicked shut, I stood there, feeling both relief and heartbreak. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror, looked into my own eyes, and said it out loud. "You are not a cage bird." I repeated it again and again until I believed it. That day, I didn't clean the kitchen. I didn't fold his shirts. I didn't make dinner. I just sat by the window all day, watching the same old tree in the front yard, the same swing that never moved anymore, the sky that slowly turned from gold to blue to black. I didn't cry, not this time, because there was something deeper than sadness now. It was quiet, still, like the moment before a storm when everything holds its breath. He came home late, didn't ask why the house was dark, didn't ask why I hadn't eaten. He just dropped his keys, loosened his tie, and walked past me like I was part of the furniture. And in that moment, something broke, not with a sound, but with silence so deep I felt it crack in my chest. I looked at him, really looked. He was tired, older, distracted, still handsome in a distant kind of way, and I realized I didn't hate him. I just didn't know him anymore, and maybe he didn't know me either. He kissed me on the forehead that night before bed, but his lips barely touched my skin. It felt like someone else brushing past me, like muscle memory, not love. I lay there, eyes open in the dark, counting the seconds between his breaths, listening to a rhythm that used to comfort me. Now it just reminded me how far away he was. We shared the same bed, but not the same dreams. The next morning, I woke up early, before him, before the sun. I sat on the floor by the window again, wrapped in my old cardigan, the one he once said made me look soft. I picked up a notebook, wrote 2 words, "I'm leaving." Then I closed it, held it to my chest. I didn't know if I meant it yet, but something in my bones whispered, "You're close now. Don't stop." The days that followed were strange. I started noticing things I hadn't in years, like how dusty the corners were, how dead the hallway plants had become, how I walked quieter now, like a guest in my own house. I began to test myself. Could I go a day without speaking to him? I could. Could I imagine packing a bag and not turning back? Yes. And each time I pictured it, the weight on my chest felt lighter. Then came the night that changed everything. He was in the living room, watching something on his phone, smiling, that smile, the same one I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't meant for me. I knew it, and somehow that hurt less than I expected. I stood behind him for a moment, just watching, and I whispered so softly I don't think he heard, "I hope she makes you happy." He turned, startled. "What did you say?" I shook my head, smiled faintly, and said, "Nothing," and walked away. But that night, I didn't sleep beside him. I curled up on the couch in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, feeling the shift finally settle. Not anger, not sadness, but clarity. The next morning, I made coffee for myself, not for him. I didn't ask if he needed anything, didn't ask about his day, didn't try, because I was done being the only one trying. He noticed. Of course, he noticed. They always do when the quiet becomes louder than the begging ever was. "Is something wrong?" he asked. And I said, "No, not anymore." I didn't explain, because what was there to say? That he lost me long before I packed a single thing, that I left in pieces, bit by bit, every time he forgot to look at me. That evening, I opened the same suitcase, the one I had zipped shut months ago. This time I filled it, not with clothes, with memories I was ready to stop carrying. A photograph, old sweater, the letters I once wrote and never gave him. I folded them gently, as if saying goodbye to someone I once knew deeply and who no longer lived here. He was in the shower when I left. I placed a letter on the table. No dramatic words, no blame, just this. This house no longer feels like home, and I no longer feel like me. So I'm going to find both again. Don't look for me. Please let me go. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry on the porch. Didn't look back. Didn't wait for him to run after me. Because I knew he wouldn't. And for the first time, I didn't need him to. The evening air kissed my cheeks. Cold, kind. A different kind of silence surrounded me, not the suffocating silence I'd lived in for years, but something open, wide, unknown. Freedom doesn't always feel like joy at first. Sometimes it feels like standing barefoot on unfamiliar ground, with your heart still bleeding, finally beating in your own rhythm again. I rented a small apartment across the city. Second floor. No view, old tiles, squeaky windows. It was mine. There were no memories hanging on the walls. No perfume I didn't wear. No echoes of footsteps I feared. Just space, blank, beautiful space, to be whoever I was now, even if I didn't fully know her yet. The first night was the hardest. I sat on the floor with tea and silence. No TV, no man brushing past me, no where's dinner, no forgotten goodnight kisses, just me. The loneliness came in waves. But this time I let it, because loneliness that comes after choosing yourself hurts less than the loneliness of staying with someone who made you feel invisible. I cried. Of course I did, but not the same way. It wasn't the silent, clenched cry in the bathroom at midnight. It was open, honest, like letting something out instead of holding everything in. The next morning, I opened the windows. The air was cold and honest. I made coffee for one, and for once, it felt enough. I started doing small things, things I hadn't done in years, watering plants, playing music while I cleaned, dancing barefoot again, a little shy at first, but the rhythm found me. I found a notebook in one of my bags, opened it, saw the words I wrote the morning I promised I would leave. I'm leaving. I smiled, and underneath, I wrote, I did. Sometimes healing doesn't come in grand epiphanies. It comes in whispers, in how you hum while folding laundry, in how you choose your own dinner without asking, in how you buy fresh flowers, not to impress anyone, but because they look lovely in the morning light. He called once, just once. I saw his name, let it ring, because there was nothing left to say that wouldn't reopen the wounds I had just begun to let breathe. I didn't hate him. I just outgrew the version of myself that needed him. Now I sleep in a bed that feels both too big and just right. I laugh louder. I say no without guilt. And sometimes I still cry, but not because I miss him, because I miss the girl I used to be. And I remind her, you're safe now. This is not the life I imagined. It's smaller, quieter, less perfect, but it's real and it's mine. And I've learned a house can be a dream